Hello, my name is Brant Hunt. My channel simply is Discerning What is True. Not tonight, but today, I'm going to be talking about an issue that's a great stumbling block for almost all of humanity. That is the idea that somehow the Bible is historical or is literal, which either particular perspective you look at is error. Okay, how do we know that? Well, it doesn't make any sense. Okay, it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. When you begin to look at the text and look at it, how can this whole thing work out with what we call the issue of Moses, or the idea of him being a leader of the Israelites when there were no Israelites at that time? This is the whole dilemma that people are not understanding. They're coming in with eyes that do not see or ears to hear, because simply what they're doing is they're coming with a presupposition. And a presupposition simply is you come in with a layer of bricks, so to speak, and you say, this is what it's going to be talking about, and before you even read it. If you're going to read a children's story or a myth, so to speak, you come in with a different perspective. Okay, you're not taking it literal or historical. You're not looking at three golden bears, with Goldilocks, or the three little pigs. You see, okay. And those words, you'll notice that I used the word. The three is also important also in scriptures, but I don't want to get off of that section. So what happens is when you come in with your presuppositions, you're not coming in with clear eyes. You're not coming in with a perspective that's actually trying to find the truth. You're just coming in what you've been taught to see. You've been taught to see in any particular book you read, say, for example, something to do with curing a tooth decay. All right, so you look at it, so it's got to be a literal truth here, such and such. What would be right? Your presupposition would be correct. It is dealing with an issue of trying to heal your teeth. Okay, all right. So when you do that, you're coming in with a right response to understand the book. But when you come in with the Bible, which actually is probably the number one book written, seller, whatever you want to call it, and yet no one understands it. Why is that? Because they come in with their eyes blind. Their presuppositions are to be, hey, you know what? This is talking about a historical. It's talking about Moses. It's a character, and as such a country as Israel, when there is no such country as Israel ever in those days. Do you follow? Because when you come in with that presupposition, you destroy what is actually being told to you that's actually important. And this is why many people are blind. And what I mean by blind, I don't mean literally. Again, they're spiritually blind. And they come in with that presupposition thinking that they know it. They had this whole conclusion in their whole lives that this is what it's talking about. Then why is the Bible also the most misunderstood book in the world? Well, it's also the number one seller, but it's also misunderstood. And the quote-unquote are supposedly people of God, supposedly, that is religious leaders, don't have the right interpretation because they're being the same thing. They're looking at it historical. Is there such a person as Moses? No. No, it's a story. These are stories. Stories to bring you to truth. You see? It's like, for example, I come in here with a refrigerator. Okay, I have a refrigerator, a freezer. That's an important thing in my life, such and such, during the quote-unquote issue of the hurricane. Why is that? Well, it's important to have that product, which is representing the flesh. Your outer part of who you are, okay? But what's inside is what's more important because it's actually food, okay? So I will be able to eat it, or water, whatever it is, ice. All those things are important for me to quote unquote, but that deals with my spirit. That's what it's talking about. So the refrigerator outer part is not the most important part. It's a shell of who you are in some ways. What is important to you is your spirit, because you come from God. You see, you always have come from God. But yet people misunderstand this. They come in with a presupposition, and they don't understand basic concepts. They're not thinking logical because they've never been taught to think logical. You see, it's so easy for people to fall and actually stumble in this area. And guess what? Now you have the attitude now most people have, oh, chunk the Bible. It's not important. You see, so that people say, well, I've been fooled. Guess what? I don't want anything to do with the Bible. They chunk it. And they made a fallacy. They fucked up because simply is the Bible is speaking truth. It is speaking about spiritual, deeper truth. But no one recognizes anything because simply they're coming in with a physical aspect. And you can't do that. And I've done that all my life. Over 40 years of my life, more than that. And yet, I tell people this stuff, and they think I'm a nut. But I'm not a nut. I know I'm not. You see. It also says in Scripture very clearly that only a few will find it. It's just like a treasure. Eternal life. Yes, we have eternal life. Our spirits are eternal. But to actually raise ourselves that way would be simply going upward, you see. Another issue would be the issue of ascension. It means moving upward to the head, to the highest part of who you are, where you have the ability to think, where everything in your body is up here to actually give you the decision to make what I need to go over here, make a right-hand turn, or look over here, such and such a left, or to move straightward. So it's actually, when you think about this, think about the Kabbalah. And the Kabbalah has what we call the right wing, the left wing, so to speak, but they both has to come together. You see, the whole idea of duality, you see. And unless you look at it in a right way, meaning not literal, not historical, then guess what's going to happen is you're not going to find the truth. It will never come to you. You can talk to people, all day long, and, they just believe this stuff. The whole idea simply of Israel. Okay, all right. Israel never existed before this 1948. Did you know that? It used to be the state of Palestine. Palestine was the name of the country there. It was never called Israel. And yet people believe it because they say, oh, this is the Bible. It's literal. It's historical. Bullshit. Bullshit. There was no country of Israel before 1948 and never has been. You see, when people come in with their certain ways of thinking, they think, oh, Israel existed long ago. It was set up by Moses, and he led his people to Canaan, which eventually we call Israel, the Israelites, you see. And yet this is what another stumbling block that people make. They don't understand these things. They don't have the right context to understand this because they don't have everything together. So when you come in and make that mistake of saying, oh, it's got to be historical, well, okay, where is the quote-unquote ark of the Noah's Ark? Where is that? Where's the boat at? Okay, there is no boat. You see, another story, a story that has historical people think it's historical or it's literal. And those who were pagans long ago understood that. They were not stupid people back then. When the pagans see this, they knew these were myths. They understood that. That was the right way of interpreting it. But yet, guess what? We had a change of the guard back in 325 AD when that all changed, when the church was established. And suddenly the church was after anyone who spoke of the different, what we call the mythical Christ, instead of the quote-unquote, their perspective, the historical Christ. But there's no proof for historical Christ, folks. Never has been. All the history we can say is your whole perspective, dynamic, being pushed on this approach and thinking that there was such a guy named Jesus Christ, all this stuff, you think that is literally true or historical true. And that's the stumbling block. That's the whole stumbling block of what people believe today. And they also believe somehow he's going to magically, you're going to such and such, he's going to save you. When in reality, guess what? You got to save yourself. That's your responsibility in life. You need to grow up. And most people don't want to deal with that. They rather hear a story. It makes them feel good, you see. And not realizing simply is that they have stumbled already by coming in with a preconception of what they think is true. And so when you do that, you'll never find the truth. You will never find the truth. And that's purposely done in some ways with the writers, whoever these writers were. They could have been Jewish writers. Who knows what they were? They wrote these things, these books, this Bible, so to speak. And it has the name, simply the Bible. And it's probably the #1 seller in the world, book-wise. Okay? And so when people come in with these preconceptions, they don't understand. Just like I'm saying, the illustration of a freezer or refrigerator. The inside part of you is more important than the outside part. Yes, the outside is important. Unless you feed yourself, you won't live. Unless you take care of yourself physically and not take drugs or smoke cigarettes or tobacco, whatever it is, which reality is these things, when you do that, are revealing also that you yourself, meaning simply is tobacco, depending upon it, you are having already a mineral deficiency in your body and you're craving something else. Same thing with alcohol. Same thing. And yet people don't want to see that because they don't want to deal with it. It's like a child. A child says, I don't want to deal with it. So I messed up something here. I didn't do something right in my bed or bath, whatever you want to call it. I don't want to deal with it. But you got to deal with it. That's why it's a mess. And that's what we're dealing with, people, simply, is that they're a mess because they don't know. They don't realize what's right before them is true, but they don't have the right glasses to see, you see. And so an illustration when I lost power here a couple of weeks ago is just an illustration of how important it is. Well, yes, the refrigerator is important. It's even important when it doesn't have any power, because I can actually keep things cooler in there as long as I keep the door closed. So I have food. I have something still to eat, so to speak. Okay, that's your spirit. Okay, that's what's inside of you. You see, it's spiritual. You see, the spiritual food. And see, I'm just giving an illustration here to explain the deeper things that what we're supposed to be about. You see. And so what happens simply is we don't take care of the body, you see, but we're most important thing, we don't take care of our spirits. You see, what is within you? You see, what within you? What's within you? Your spirit. Your spirit comes from God. Okay? It comes from God. And we came from spirit. We came from God. But along the way, we've forgotten. Either that's purposely done or we just simply forgotten. I don't have the answer for that. But I will explain to you simply this. Most people where I live at, which is the American South, they believe every bit of the Bible being quote unquote true. That's why they're waiting for Jesus to come back. When Jesus never came back, Jesus never came here in the first place. That's another thing, it's an oxymoron statement. Why would God come here to be someone else? Okay? You see, we've had many stories. 16 crucified saviors. A guy named Percy Graves. Look him up. Read the book. These are stories revealed long ago in India, long ago that there was someone going to be a savior coming about. But they were mythical, you see. And people took them literally again. And, it's easy to be in the majority. It's the most easy thing to be. I'll just go with the crowd. They know what they're talking about. No, they don't. No, they don't. Always the crowd gets it wrong. Always. You can take, for example, the elections here in the United States. Oh, we got the best president, such and such, da-da-da-da, for example. Okay, all right. And everybody, majority says, well, this is what we want. He's the best guy, such and such. Okay, all right. And then you come out and find out 4 years of a mess. Okay, so he wasn't such a great guy. But no one will admit that, you see. Oh, well, that didn't work out. No, he wasn't the best guy. It didn't work out, you see. This is what people just do not understand. And I think they choose to be this way. You see, you have to take care of the body, but you don't have to be a slave to the body. What I mean by that simply is You have to make sure you clean yourself. You may have to make sure you have to eat properly. You have to feed yourself correctly. But then what happens simply is the flesh craves other things. This is what the Bible is somewhat talking about. Simply is the flesh wanting whatever it wants. And what that means simply is no longer are you in control, but it has control of you. And so what happens simply is that the frame of mind is you have to have is that I'm determined to find the truth. And if I'm determined to find the truth, I'm going to seek it out. But if I'm not determined to find the truth, I'll never find it. It's a perspective. It's a mind think in some ways that see if I'm looking for the truth, that's all I'm looking for. It's my purpose, why I'm here. Okay. But people think it's supposed to be, something's going to be thrown out of a candy vehicle and given to them. No, it doesn't work that way. If you want to be a doctor, you want to be a lawyer, you have to study for it. You have to study many years. And if you're a doctor, you not only pass grades and stuff in medical school, you have to also practice in a hospital before you can actually get your license to be a doctor. Now, that's the way life is if you choose to want to be a doctor. The same thing as a lawyer, same type of thing. People don't understand it. You're practicing law. You're practicing medical procedures. Okay, so if you're not, seeking out of these things, it's not going to be given to you at all. You see, this is what people misunderstand, and they choose to stay that way, and they blame God for it. When in reality, God didn't do anything at all. Period. Because God is timeless, folks. Let's just get realistic here. God is timeless. He doesn't come here. Do you understand that? If Jesus was God, why did he come here? He's timeless. This is another thing a misnomer people have. They don't understand. Why don't you understand? It's frustrating to see this simply is that people don't want to know the truth, really. They don't. They want an easy, give me a savior. Just give me one. Help me out, such and such attitude. Give it to me. As though it's owed to them. No, it's not owed to you at all unless you work and pursue it. And so the idea simply is to go back. Okay, so we're thinking of why would God enter this area? Why would he enter this way? Let's talk about the phony, what we call, the whole idea of this is a 3D world. Why would God choose to come here physically? Why would he do that? And there's no proof that Jesus was ever here. Okay, so that means simply is, guess what? Okay, what that means simply is the Bible is telling the truth, but it's a myth. It's trying to reveal truth to you if you have ears to hear and eyes to see. But is your heart ready for it? Most of you chunk it. You don't want to know it because guess what? So-and-so believes this over here. You see, well, I don't know. I might not be accepted by my community, such and such. That's what you fear. Yeah, you fear that. You fear to be able to stand up and say, you know what? I could be wrong. That's another issue. People don't want to admit that they're wrong. They will not admit it. They will not admit that they fucked up, okay? In a relationship or whatever. They want to blame somebody else, which is just like a child. Just like a child. And so we have adults today who've grown up and they act just like children. That's why they never find the truth. Because they're playing around. They're not even close to the object. They don't understand who they are. It's really sad. It's really sad. You look around and you try to share these things with people, and it's your choice. You're going to reincarnate here over and over again. So God is always going to give you many, many, many times to even come to even any type of knowledge of this. And he understands, you see. And yet we have this whole idea again of a literal hell, see. Okay, so this scares people. So they use that as a fear factor. See. And so I was just trying to give you a comparison of a freezer or refrigerator, because reality is what's within you is important because you have a spirit. Okay. God has given that to you. Okay. And if you choose to wisely, you will pursue those things. And that's what me and Phil Langdon have been trying to share about these things, especially Phil, when he sees the symbolic ideas of what's being spread through these scriptures. It is key for us to see these things because Phil has done the work. He's done the great work. And we should be, actually, all of us should be, hey, you know, this guy's really phenomenal. And also, the simply is, he's not in it for the money. You know? And yet, this is the whole another stumbling block. Oh, well, then obviously he's not telling the truth because these books are not worthy of reading. No, excuse me, that doesn't work that way. But this is the mind think of people. Well, you know, this guy's got credibility and he's got all these people, fans following. Yeah, that's what the crowds do. They follow the losers, the ones who don't really actually know the truth, the ones who actually deceive you and keep you deceived all along. You never find the truth, you see. Here's an idea, simply, it's another idea that, you know, like the idea of Jesus coming here. Well, what about the issue of Mary? Okay, Mary supposedly is a virgin. This is another way of simply, you know, seeing things wrongly. And so, how could she, quote unquote, have Jesus? Well, God's Spirit must have impregnated her. But that doesn't make any sense, folks, does it? Of course it doesn't. The stories are more important because the stories reveal the truth, not the literal framework. When you look at the literal framework, you're already on the wrong bus. Okay? You don't understand. And you're deceived. And if you come to the idea simply is, okay, I made a mistake, I don't understand, I'm willing to try whatever it is. And we have that opportunity now to learn these things because the internet gives us a lot more ways of getting to the truth than before. So when we talk about the historical Jesus, the only person that says that he was, quote unquote, around was Josephus. Okay? But he only puts us, I said it so such and such. And Josephus was not in Israel, or in Palestine, I should say. He was in, quote unquote, Iran, you see. So, you know, somebody was working together here in cahoots. Can you get it? So he never even saw Jesus because there was no Jesus in the first place. But he had to lead the story to keep you in quote unquote this mysterious historical figure called Jesus Christ. And people have been fooled by that for thousands of years. It's a very, very sneaky way of destroying, because they got rid of the other thing, you know, they got rid of all the pagans, you know. They didn't want them to tell the truth, did they? Got to get rid of those guys. Can't have those guys around. Can't have their books around. That's what they were hoping, you know. They were hoping that those books would not come back out, you know. Not to say that the Bible was anything wrong with it, you see. But there were other Gnostic works out there that were trying to point out that it was Gnostic, more deeper. But that doesn't mean all of it means that the Bible is all incorrect. The problem is simply the Bible is truly telling the truth. The problem is nobody's reading it in its way it's supposed to be read. So when you look at, you know, those children's stories, you know, Three Bears, and Red Riding Hood, and, all these stories are revealing something more deeper. That's what it's about, you see. That's what myths are always about. They would tell these stories to the children, so they would understand them in a children's way, but also recognize that when something happens later on in their life, when they become adults, they will realize something's wrong here, and they will not participate in something that might be some way of deceiving them. Yes, I studied church history, and I studied what the Catholics did. That they got rid of not only the pagans, but they chose also to get rid of others who did not go along with them and killed them. Now, excuse me, folks, is that what God would do? Would he choose to, quote unquote, kill people? Oh, you don't agree with me, so I'm going to blow you away. Is that the kind of God you want to worship? But that's what Christians worship. You see, they think they have the truth, the Christians do. And they are deceived because they believe in a historical. That's why it's so important for them to have the biblical archaeological books and such. They're trying to prove these things that actually exist in the history. And it ain't there. Hello, it's not there. And it won't be there, and it never will be there. You see. But these guys are writing because they keep such and such, and they think they find stuff. Oh, I think we found Noah's Ark, such and such, on such and such mountain here. But they never come down with any evidence, do they? It's just a such and such story. Because there never was a ark, Noah's Ark. You see. They deceived themselves so much they believe this, they're it's like a child, they're deceived. The same idea was simply as with Santa Claus. The idea of Santa Claus. Yeah, this whole idea of Santa Claus. And the whole idea simply is that people believe these stories and they think, oh, they're true. But they're not. They never were. There was no historical Jesus. There was no historical Israel ever. Ever. And who were the Jews? Jews are not a certain group of people, folks. They were those who pursued the truth. They were what we would call going to the, what's the word I'm trying to think of? I'm trying to think of the word. The idea simply is that the great work, the places where they would have practice, you would go there for 7 years. I think me and Phil talked about it. I might be wrong. It might be 12 years. And they would be taught by the masters, such and such. But it would be all in a secret type of group. You see, a small group. And they would give up their time, 7 years period of time, to learn these things. Notice it simply is we have 7 days in a week. That's another type of thing. How did that come about? Hermetical principles here. All that stuff is here, but people are not able to connect it, you see. The literal framework and historical framework of scriptures is baloney. And when you tie yourself to that, you have to believe it, because guess what? You can't base it upon facts. You see, it's based upon your own prejudice of thinking it's true. So you back it up because simply you've got to keep giving support for it, when in reality there is no support for it. You see, there was no Moses. There was no Adam and Eve. These are stories. But you come in with those certain eyeglasses and you think, oh, it's got to be true. But then they say, here's what they tell you. Oh, the earth is only 6,000 to 7,000 years old. That's baloney too. How can that work out, folks? Man's been here for a long time. Not as long as the animals have been here, but man has been here a lot longer than 7,000 years. You see, that's their framework. So when they put that framework there, you got to believe that in order to, quote unquote, go to heaven in their teachings. And it's not true. And they don't want to allow you to look at other things. They don't want you to look into Kabbalah. They don't want you to look into metaphysics. Only such a way of looking at the Bible. When in reality, there's nothing wrong with the Bible. But what they want you to do simply is look at it the way they look at it, you see. And if you can come away from that and begin to understand simply is, guess what? This doesn't make any sense. Why would God choose to kill other people? Philistines, Hittites, such and such. Are those really real kingdoms? Or has this all been, quote unquote, made up again? If there's written stories, they've all been made up, you see. And who are the Israelites? Well, the Israelites would be, what they came up with, the Israelites, so to speak. But there's no factual proof that they've been here that long, okay? You see, this is a enormous way of fooling people to the point that they never even try to fix it, try to find out. Because people give up, they quit. They won't go on. They won't pursue it. And in this age, it's actually much easier in some ways because you can find some of these works. You can find Gerald Massey's works, a ton of works. Alvin Boyd Kuhn, another one. are revealing other information. Yeah, the Egyptians are for real. There's no doubt about that, you see. And so they took it from that phrase point, so to speak, and then built upon it. Could Moses be someone else? That's a possibility. I don't know yet, but I don't think it's literal. See, if you take it literal, it'll cause you to stumble. Me and Phil have talked about this whole idea of, taking it literal. If it's historical, you would have to prove it. This is why a gentleman here, Bart Ertman, I think his name is, Etman, he's looking at it simply as he's chunking the Bible because simply it's there saying it's historical. He's kind of saying, no, it's not historical. And he grew up in a Christian church, so to speak, belief system, and eventually he began to look into other things. I think he went to Princeton University, Princeton Theological Seminary, and began to look at things a little bit differently, which was actually the great opening of the early 1900s, as it suddenly began to people say, wait a minute, this doesn't make any sense. It doesn't, what I mean by sense, it doesn't have any logical perspective to it. And when it doesn't have any logical perspective to it, something's wrong here. And if it's not logical, not true, then it's a belief. Okay, it's very simple. If you cannot explain your belief in a logical manner and make sense of it, then it's just a belief. And that's the fallacy. And so when you say there was a literal Jesus, prove it. Prove it. Show me. Show me where it's at. Show me. Tell me this. Because in reality simply is you don't have a leg to stand on. You don't. So you can see how scriptures knew that this, and the New Testament very clearly, the path is wide. Because simply it's the easiest thing to do. For example, politically, let's go with the idea of people who go out and march in front of the square and demand these things, such and such, because people are afraid to stand up alone. Psychologically, people do not have the gumption, hardly, unless they're a certain personality. They're able to, quote unquote, stand up against what they call tyranny. And what happens simply is most will not do that. They have to be in a crowd. So they eventually think they're in the right group, so they water it down, so to speak. And people think, oh, these people must be such and such good people. No, they're just being pulled off to the side, so to speak. It's just a show, folks. It's just a show. You see, So it's enormously important for you to understand that if you can get these quote stumbling blocks out of your lives, which is to do with historical perspective and also the literal interpretation of Scripture, then you've already in some ways realized simply is that you see that these are you think these are what we call mansions, so to speak, built on sand. And they're fallacies because they don't hold any grain of sand. They don't hold any grain of truth in them. You see, I believe in so and so. So what? Big deal. You see, truth is truth. Truth stands on its own. It's on a solid ground. It's not swayed by which way the waves are blowing, which way the media is saying things such and such or whatever. It's not played by that way. Truth is self-evident within yourself. You don't have to prove it to anybody else. It's only for you because it's about your own spiritual walk. It's not about anybody else. That's choice. That's their choice, whatever. Your choice, if you want to pursue it, you pursue it with everything you've got. And the greatest time I know of simply is in my lifetime is what Phil Langdon shares with me. And people say, well, why Phil Langdon, why others? Because frankly, he doesn't sell his books for making money. Okay? Not like everybody else. Not like these other people out here who sell you all these things, stories about quote unquote Ankh and all this other crazy crap. You see, oh, there's some type of aliens or something like that. And they're shooting in the dark. They're just making money off of you. They're laughing with you, laughing at you as you. In fact, the problem simply is they're fooled by themselves. You see. It's scary, isn't it? Anyway, I don't want to talk, I want to talk for about 35 minutes, but the point simply is that they, like I said, your higher self is your inner self. That is your spirit. That's who you are. You came from God. Okay? You always come from God. That's why you have higher, somewhat principles inside of you in some ways. I don't need to do the wrong thing here. I need to tell the truth. This would be better if I do the truth. In fact, me and Phil have talked about simply, people are basically good. People don't go out and kill people. Okay? They don't murder people. They don't go out and shoot people. They don't try to steal from people as much because they know it's morally wrong. They know it's wrong inside them because they would not want that to happen to them. They would not want someone else to kill them over something very petty, like a pair of sneakers, shoes, or a few dollars in the pocket of somebody. Because all of us have enormous value in God's eye, you see. So we'll stop here, and thank you for listening. Again, the idea that the Bible is somehow historical literal, which causes people, I messed up here, I typed too quick sometimes. It's which, I put CIH, sorry about that, causes people to stumble, and it does. It's enormously out there. Start talking to people. I talk to them here, and I'm somewhat amused, not because I know everything, no I don't, but I am amused simply is that people just simply follow the crowd. They follow their certain system. You ever notice something else? I'll say this one more. Why are there so many denominations? Hello? How many denominations are in the Protestant faith? More than 100. I'm sure there's probably 200. Why is that? Because the leaders that took over and create some little aunts or different perspective in how they baptize somebody. Oh, we dunk people. We don't dunk them one time. We dunk them 3 times. Oh, no. We don't do infant baptism. We do adult baptism. All these little clever little things these leaders come up with, such and such, and create another quote-unquote denomination. You ever notice that? How many churches are on the whole? The other thing, here's another one. Here's a real one. If they're so-called quote-unquote something really real about them, wouldn't they have something that would be real in their lives? Wouldn't it be something that strikes you to say, wait a minute, that's someone I'd like to know something about? No, there's nothing different. Nothing's happened to these people. Nothing's happened at all in these people, you see. And that's what they don't understand. If you look at it on the outside, you realize simply, no, there's nothing different in this guy. He cheats somebody and steals from somebody. That's what he does. He does the same thing that other people do. What's the difference of him and saying, oh, I'm somebody else? And then they have simply, oh, well, God forgives me. God, it blows my mind, the excuses that they make. We all fail. I'm not saying that. But it's just amazing when you go around and you talk to people such and such, such and such. It's just a belief system. I mean, you got Christians right now that believe in there's talk about one other thing here. The whole idea of prophecy. The whole idea of the book of Revelations, the book of Daniel, all these things, and they think it's literal. It's not literal. So they think the end of the world's coming. I'm not saying there's not bad things going on in our world right now. There is a ton of bad things. But it's always been like this. It's somewhat of chaos. But the problem simply now is why it's on the internet. You can actually read something, what happens in certain areas, such and such, and some damage is this and that, or the leaders of such and such. It's not like it was in the newspaper long ago when only a few people read the newspapers, because a lot of people didn't even know how to read back then, you see. Well, the problem is simply people know how to read today, but they don't know how to understand. They can't think. So anyway, thank you for being here. I wish you the best day today. Hope you have ears to hear and eyes to see. Take care.